Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Hi, this is Jay for the interview.
Oh, hey, Jay, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and you?
I'm doing awesome, Jay. Thanks.
Man, this is a blast from the past. I gotta fill you in. We've known each other going back 25 years. I was the record label for Duncan Fora.
I just saw the last name.
I'm reminiscent of all of us jamming over at Barron's house over there in Eagle Rock.
Eagle Rock, of course.
Man,
Yosemite Drive.
I know. I was able to watch this whole journey you've been on. I remember you telling me, "Hey, man, you're working at Aaron's, and Henry Rollins came in."
Oh, wow! Thanks so much.
Yeah,
oh, great to talk to you.
Yeah, man, it's awesome to see this happen, man. Couldn't happen to a better guy.
Oh, thanks so much. It's been super exciting, especially these past couple of weeks. I mean, we've just, I've been talking to people every day, and we just got back from New York playing the first show, and everybody's just so into it. We just did an interview with Alice Cooper for his radio show, and
oh, wow.
The reviews are coming through strong, and lots of people in the UK are just now catching on too. So we want to do as much as we can, and everybody's. I think at the end of the thing, the whole band just felt like, wow, this is so easy. It's the easiest thing. It wasn't ever supposed to even happen. It
happened because of the music.
Yeah, it's weird, And do you still talk to Duncan at all?
I do. He's living out in Vegas.
Yeah. We've kept in touch a little bit. I saw him a couple years ago there, but it's been a few years now, maybe even 5. We always say 2, but then it turns out to be 6.
Yeah, I know. You look at the clock and you can't believe time flies.
Yeah.
Well,
I got
amazing.
his record and.
Yeah. Take us back. I mean, growing up, I know you're from Delaware, but what were some of that first music? What were some of those first bands that just really blew your head off?
Well, of course, it all starts with the Beatles for me, because even I was born in '68, which I never give my real birthday, but I'm kind of over it now. So and by the time I was 2, I can really remember being into 45s and the sounds that were coming out of these. I'm from a big family, not my own family, but my mom had a lot of brothers and sisters, so I had a lot of cousins that were all into music, and so early on everybody had 45s, and I would hear all these different sounds, and I loved it all, from Elton John to Jackson 5 to the Partridge Family to the Beatles, and I caught the end of that, and I was given a lot of Beatles singles, hand-me-downs, that each one was something like, it was like that was school for me, like hearing those records one by one. And they taught me a lot of things, and one thing that they've taught me is that, it's got to be kind of the best of the best, and don't settle for less, because you never got that feeling as much with any other group. And for some reason, the Beatles were the top. But of course, I loved all the other stuff too, Elvis, and that led to the Stones. And that's, and by the time I was 7 years old, there was the Bay City Rollers with, millions of girls screaming, and I thought, wait, these are the next Beatles. So see, that was the first time I was fooled by the machine. And I still love the Bay City Rollers, of course, But, that was the marketing of it was, the new Beatles for me. So that's what attracted me to that band, and that made me, Eric Faulkner made me choose the guitar. My parents, my dad had a weekend country band, like he would just play bars on the weekends, and there was always instruments at the house, and the first thing that I could do was kind of play a beat on my dad's drummer's drum kit, and so I got a drum set early on, but then it was the guitar that made me want to write songs and guitar riffs and little licks and stuff, So that's what turned that into that. And when I came to LA, it was really about writing songs more so than being in a band, because I wasn't David Lee Roth, so I wasn't, going to come out here and be the front man for some hard rock band, that, especially at that time when it was like, Skid Row type bands, and those, didn't fit into that at all, But eventually you just start playing with friends, and that's how the original Mother Superior came around because it was a trio of three guys that just wanted to play music together as friends. And we all listened to the same kind of music, and we would get together and watch bootleg Kiss videos and things, you know, and say, man, remember when rock and roll was like, you know, because of the sound, not because of the, and maybe Kiss was the wrong example for that too, you know, but it was, you know, we knew that when we plugged in, I can't play guitar like Eddie Van Halen and those, all those bands that were influenced by him. I can't play that style of guitar. So for me, it was like, I can play Clapton, Hendrix kind of bluesy rock guitar. So we just kind of figured, turn it up and let's play like the stuff that we really like. And that's what led to the playing in LA and having people, the first people being attracted to Mother Superior and people coming up to us and going, wow, you guys sound really great. And it was the same thing. We weren't even really trying to be a band. We were just, you know, friends playing together. And that's the first time that I felt that feeling. This new band is the first time I've felt that feeling in a lot of years. You know, nothing against Mother Superior. I just almost forgot, because you start going through these cycles of like trying to record an album just so you can get back on the road and go to the European spots that you've been going to the past 5 times. And I'm not putting it down, you know, but it does kind of turn into like a cycle that just keeps repeating itself when it doesn't get any further, you know. And everybody was still kind of into it, but there were disappointments and frustrations with it not being what everybody wanted it to be, you know. And people get families, and people have wives and relationships, and they have children, and then, you know, then there's responsibility there that, you know, they don't always get from sending your husband off to a 2-month tour of Europe, and, you know, he comes back partied out and tired with, you know, a couple grand in his pocket that's supposed to last, you know, what, the next 6 months, you know. And then, you know, so it's a hard thing. So I am really like turning this into a whole circular story. So, but that kind of led to me playing with Daniel Lanois, because he, you know, he had seen me play with Rollins. He was a fan of the music, and then, you know, he just kept asking me to go on the road with him. And every time that happened more and more, I just kept going for it more. And Mother Superior got put a little bit in the background just because it wasn't as fun. It wasn't as I mean, the people that loved the band, it was great, but, you know, we could never get any support from labels and things, because we were doing well enough that we were kind of like, an independent label wouldn't have been able to do anything much more for us, but, you know, the major label wasn't going to take a chance on it either. So we learned about the record industry through working at record stores and things, and got distribution for our own records, and a couple European labels put some things out which helped spread the word in a few different countries. Spain comes to mind as a place that we were able to, sometimes we would tour Spain for a month, you know, a whole month, and we were known throughout there because of the rock magazines there still talk about current American rock and roll bands. You know, they still put the spotlight on rock and roll that comes from America. So lots of that stuff was great, but, you know, you can only do it so many times before you feel like it's just shredding, you know. And it was kind of like, it must be the way the Stones feel sometimes, how they make a new record, and, you know, when you go to see them play, they got to play Jumpin' Jack Flash, you know. And of course, I'm one of those people too, you know. But it'd be interesting to think if the Stones would actually record a whole new album and then say, we're going to do a tour, we're just going to play the new album. And, you know, do it for the music. Like, do that for the music and not for the same paycheck or whatever, you know. Just one time, I think that'd be cool. Anyway, I hope that answered that.
Oh, absolutely. Now, when you hooked up with Henry Rollins, what is it that made you guys click, and what, you know, did you learn the most from working with Henry?
Well, the thing about Henry is at that time, I have an old reel-to-reel 4-track machine, and because of the style of music that we were into, Mother Superior, I knew that I could capture that kind of Deep Purple sound a bit, you know, on my tape recorder. So I had recorded a demo. We did 9 songs, and we tried to make it sound. I mean, we didn't really have to try that hard. We had a couple good mics and a decent, you know, analog tape recorder, TAC tape recorder. So because we didn't spend any money on the recording of it, CDs were like a brand new thing. It was '93, and especially demos on CD. People were still giving out cassette demos. So we put a little bit of money into pressing up a CD, a demo CD of that stuff. And I had them with me at all times when I worked in the record store, just for, you know, if a friend came in, I could give them a copy, or if somebody that, you know, I started talking about my band, and they said, oh, I want to hear it, you know, and then I'd give them a copy. And Rollins, I had known, I was already I'm a Black Flag fan and a Rollins Band fan for years, and I knew that he loved Thin Lizzy, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. You know, he's raved about that music forever. So we were, you know, kind of in that genre of just loud blues rock. So I just gave him a copy of the CD and just said, you know, give it a listen whenever you get a chance. And I had talked to him before. He had been in the store a couple times. He was a collector, and he would come in and buy a ton of music. So it was, you know how the story changes. The Brian Williams and all of us, I want to say that same night he called, but it might have been the next day or whatever, you know, and he called and he said, the music sounds great, and anything I can do for you guys, just let me know. So we had started recording some proper 24-track recordings at that time. So I said, you know, when we get some rough mixes, we'll let you check it out. And he said, I have a DAT machine at my place, so when you get some mixes, bring your DAT over. That's how long ago we're talking. So we just kept in touch, and then from there he did the liner notes for that album, and then he produced our third album called Deep, and he had just finished making his second record for DreamWorks with his old Rollins band, and it took them 2 years to make the record, and they really struggled with, as a band. They were at that point that, you know, I was talking about. They were at that point where they had done so much, and it had become like this, you know, arguing family rather than, you know, a fun friend thing. And he saw us make the album we were making, the Mother Superior album. We had no money, so we had to run into a studio and run out. So I think we did it all in 3 days, you know. I was joking about Motor Sister. It took us 2 days to do the Motor Sister album, but that's because we could, and we had a great producer, Jay Rustin, who's an amazing engineer too. But in the Mother Superior days, we would record that fast because that's all we could afford, you know. We would just get a little small, there were so many studios back then, as you know, like, you know, old LA studios that were willing to beat the other guy's price. So you'd always find some studio that give you some great deal, you know. And that's the cool thing about the old Mother Superior records, is some of the studios that we recorded at are all long gone, you know, from Cherokee to that one TTG, which was on like McCadden off of Sunset, where Hendrix did some stuff there, and the Velvet Underground recorded there. That was always the most exciting part, was to be walk into these old studios and see their things they had hanging on the wall, gold records and stuff, and go, wow, Rod Stewart recorded here, or whatever. But Rollins saw us do that record in 3 days, and he asked if he was going to take a break from his old Rollins band and do a solo album, and he said, would you guys want to maybe try to write some songs together? And the energy that we had together and the excitement from that, the songs kept coming out. So then it turned into, well, let's make a whole record together. What are we going to call it? What are we going to call it? And the management said, if you call it Rollins Band, you guys can go on the road tomorrow. So unfortunately for the old band, they received an email saying that they were no longer Rollins Band, but it was, you know, Henry's name and everything. And of course we had to take the chance, and we were doing shows before the album came out, and fans didn't even know that there was a new band. They didn't even realize that there was a new Rollins Band. We would just show up on the stage and play straight through for an hour and 15 minutes as fast as we could. And that's kind of how that, between recording fast and lightning fast live shows, that's how the sound of Mother Superior was born, you know. So the band always had to keep that kind of thing, and that leads to Motor Sister. When Scott Ian, you know, the band hadn't played together for 8 years, and I hadn't thought about those songs because I'd been doing other stuff with Daniel and whatever, and my own solo stuff. I did a solo album and a solo tour, and I did a nice tour of Europe for that too, and I went to some crazy places where I found that people have been listening to things that I've been doing, you know what I mean? So that was really exciting for me to do a different tour just under my own name, you know. That was the first time. And, you know, this past year I've done a world tour with Emmylou Harris, and then we did the U.S. tour for Daniel's new album, and then I go out in May for the European part of that. So, you know, I've been really fortunate to be part of his camp for many years now. I've learned so much about music and friendship with him. One of the reasons that I'm one of the longest standing people in the Daniel Lanois camp is because me and Daniel are really great friends, and we don't rely on each other all the time, but when we do, I mean, when we're on the road together, it sounds funny, but we get together in the morning and we work out together, you know, and talk about the show the night before. We just do, you know, we like to do stretches and things far back to keep us, you know, sane on the road and, you know, talk about things. So we're always talking about music, and I learned so much about recording from him and singing from him and playing from him and instruments, you know, just, you know, different things. And so it's a continuing musical journey, and somehow it led to Scott wanting to hear the Mother Superior songs again, and would I play them with him at his party with a couple other buddies that were totally into it as well. And I've known Joey Vera for years, the bass player. He's mixed and mastered a bunch of stuff for Mother Superior in the past. He was always a big fan, always came to the shows. The first rehearsal we did for Scott's party was the first time that I met John Tempesta, but he's been friends with Scott and Joey for years, and Pearl, Scott's wife. And he comes from the same place as all of us, you know. He comes from the same rock and roll. All we talk about is everything that we've seen on Don Kirshner's rock concert while we were growing up, and, you know, all the great, you know, dinner conversation is always like, what was your first concert that you went to? And, you know, it's just rock and roll stories all the time. That's how we relate, you know, and it comes out in the music, I think, because we all know what we think it should sound like. And when we did the album, and I didn't want those guys to copy the old Mother Superior records either. I didn't want it to sound just like that. So everybody added their own little flavors, and that's what gets smiles too, is when it's giving it a place to... There was a punk rock thing with Mother Superior that was more about youth and, I don't want to say showing off, but there was a little bit of that because it was a trio, so each person could try to outdo the other person. And now it's just more like, you know, everybody coming from a level of having been there before, and we know the dynamics of it better. The dynamic of the music is better because now we're not afraid to get quiet, so then we can get really loud, you know what I mean?
Well, it's amazing music. It's so great to see the journey continue. I'm so proud of you. It's going to be really exciting to see this live. I hope you got an LA date planned.
We do, March 11th at the Whiskey.
Wow.